Trump has repeatedly used the phrase silent majority on the campaign trail. He seems to be simply referring to people who feel overlooked. Listen.
So you have a silent majority in this country that feels abused, that feels forgotten, that feels mistreated. And it's a term that hasn't been brought up in years, as you know. People haven't heard that term in many years. And it's sort of interesting as to why. There are all different reasons. But I think it's a very descriptive term. Every time I speak, I have sold-out crowds. Every time I speak, I have standing ovations. Every single time. It's the silent majority. They want to see wins. They want to see us have victory.
But as the Washington Post points out, quote, for many, the silent majority is a not-so-subtle reference to white people who want to take their culture and their country back. And the argument goes they would be taking it back from those who aren't white. Corey Elam's is former communications advisor to President Obama and senior vice president of Vox Global. Ron Christie is former special assistant to President George W. Bush and deputy assistant to Vice President Dick Cheney. So, Corey, when you hear silent majority, are you thinking Donald Trump is being racist?
Well, let's be clear. Donald Trump is the P.T. Barnum of today. He's a carnival barker who is very good at getting attention for himself. And also, the silent majority of yesterday is the Tea Party of today. And he knows exactly what he's saying when he says this. Look, this has been a really tough week for Republicans when it comes to racial issues. First, you had Jose Ramos being kicked out of Donald Trump's press conference. Then you had this notion of anchor babies by Jeb Bush. And then you had former Grand Wizard of the KKK, David Duke, endorsing Donald Trump. So Reince Priebus I'm sure is cowering in the corner right now because this is not the way to grow the party. This is not moving in the direction that he needs it to move.
I'm old enough, Ron, to remember when Richard Nixon was talking about the silent majority, and he seemed to be using it to refer to, middle-class Americans who sort of weren't out there in the streets protesting the Vietnam War. Is it really a racist reference?
I don't think it is, John. Good morning. If you look at that speech from November of 1969, President Richard Nixon was talking about a sense of, there are a lot of protests going on, there's the counterculture movement, and there's a silent majority of Americans who want to take their country back, and they want to have pride in their country. And the interesting thing about Donald Trump using the term silent majority, John, is this. I think for those who believe the term is racist are going to say Trump is being racist. But I think what Trump is talking about, and Corey, my good friend, says that, this is the Tea Party of today. The Tea Party was brought about by the fact that Americans believe they're taxed enough already. They believe the size and the scope of the government is too big already. And I think that's the silent majority that Trump is trying to build into, of people who say, you know what, there's too much power and influence in Washington. Let's get America back in the hands of Americans.
When Donald Trump announced his candidacy, Corey, it fell during the hours happening now as on the air, and we carried his announcement speech live. He did it without a teleprompter. I always had the feeling that day and in every batch of remarks he's made since that he's completely winging it, speaking off the cuff. So, I mean, is the silent majority remark really such a pre-planned and I don't know, deceptive turn of phrase, or is it just something that came to the top of his mind?
Well, listen to what he said. He said the silent majority has been known and defined in other ways. So Trump has a way of being ignorant when it's convenient for him, but very smart when it's convenient for him. So he knows exactly what he's saying when he says it. And look, the numbers here, especially with Hispanic voters, this matters, right? At the high water mark for George W. Bush in his 2 elections, he received 44% of the Hispanic vote, right? And Barack Obama's 2 elections, his high water mark was 71% of support from the Hispanic community. Right now, Donald Trump, who is leading the polls for the Republican, likely some think to be their nominee, has a negative 51% approval rating with Hispanics. That is painful. And if he's the nominee, and Reince Priebus knows this, there's no way you can win in the general election with a negative 51% approval rating from Hispanics. That's a real problem for them.
Ron, he has been doing well. He was supposed to have an event in Mobile, Alabama tonight, 2,000-seat arena. They had to book the much larger 40,000-seat football stadium to get the people in who apparently want to attend.
You know, John, I think what Donald Trump speaks to is a dissatisfaction in the United States with people who are saying the politicians in Washington, they make all these promises. They say that they're going to cut the budget deficit, that they're going to repeal Obamacare. They're going to do all these things. And you know what? They don't do anything. They don't actually mean what they say. And I think that as we head now past Labor Day and start whittling the field down from 17 Republican candidates down to a more manageable size, I think people are going to take a stronger look at Donald Trump's positions and look at his leadership skills and say, do his positions and his leadership match up with where we want to take the country? And I think that's going to be a very interesting debate for the days to come.
Some people look at him, Corey, and say, look, he's done a pretty good job building a real estate empire. His golf courses are beautiful. He's a guy with attention to detail. He rebuilt the ice skating rink in New York using, well, the city hadn't been able to accomplish in years. He did it in some number of months. He's a guy who gets things done. What's wrong with that?
Well, I think the problem right now is that his rhetoric is exclusionary. When he talks about the fact that Mexicans love me, he's going to get the Mexican vote, people see that as pejorative.
Well, when President Obama compares, Republicans to crazies, that's kind of the same thing, isn't it?
Well, that's not right either. I mean, we shouldn't be throwing names around in either party, that's to be sure. But right now, we're talking about winning, John. We're talking about winning at the end of the day. And this is not a winning strategy, excluding large swaths of the American public from voting for you because you're either speaking against them or you don't support the policies that would help to make their lives better. That's not the way to grow a party. Again, we're talking about the narrowest margins in presidential history. In 2000 and 2004, George Bush won, but he won by razor-thin margins. You compare that to 2008 and 2012, the reason Democrats won is because they grew the base of the party dramatically by having a bigger open tent with rhetoric and with policies. You have the exact opposite of that with Republicans right now, and it's not. And because the other candidates are so silent, because they haven't spoke up against him, they are complicit in this as well. And that's why it's a negative thing for the party overall.
I don't think you can say that they have been silent. There are a number of other candidates who have been challenging Donald Trump on much of what he says. Ron, I'll give you the last word. Is he making the party, is he broadening the tent? Is he giving the party a bigger tent? Or is he appealing to a very narrow constituency?
I think it's too early to say, John. I think that certainly there's some things that he's said in weeks past that have been very divisive. I do think Americans are optimistic and positive by nature. I think that Americans are looking for a leader to actually act on what they say and mean what they say, and Trump is tapping into that. But at the end of the day, I think we're going to have a Republican nominee who is going to be able to contrast the record of the last 8 years and say, here's my positive vision for America, here's why we don't need 4 more years of the Obama administration, and I think that's ultimately why we're going to win it. It's not going to be about Donald Trump.
We'll be talking about it for...
It'll be about Donald Trump if it is Donald Trump. I'll say that.
Well, that truer words were never spoken. Corey Elons, Ron Christie, thank you both.